90 years ago today signaled one of the darkest moments in history. Adolf Hitler took control of Germany. But did you know that just one day after that, a man named William Dudley Pelley did his best here in the Carolinas to be just like the fascist leader? Is history repeating itself? Tonight, Queen City News goes beyond the headlines to explore the history of Pelley's Silvershirts. Adolf Hitler's Nazi movement polarized the world back in the 1930s. Hate spread, eventually leading to World War and bringing genocide to millions. As Hitler was rising to prominence in Europe, Nazism had reached the United States, influencing one man in Asheville, North Carolina.
The Christian Commonwealth. What is it?
William Dudley Pelley wanted to bring fascism to the U.S.
Pelley was pretty clear about his desire for a white Christian nation.
Western North Carolina historian John Elliston has written about William Dudley Pelley over the years.
The nicest thing Pelley would say about the Jews is that he would like to give them a separate land to live on, a place to concentrate them, almost in a camp, if you will. In other words, his ultimate objectives would have been a lot like Hitler's.
Pelley created the Silver Legion, or Silvershirts. No swastika, but a scarlet L for liberation. And much like Hitler, they were a cult of personality.
The Silver Legion, like the brown shirts that inspired them, were very obsessed with their attire. Pelley himself was something of a dandy and wanted to make sure that the uniforms were just so. So they would get their uniforms on, do marches and what have you, hold occasional public rallies.
Pelley's greatest power was his publishings, leaflets, pamphlets, newsletters, and audio recordings of lies, conspiracy theories, and propaganda, all pushed out from right here in this very building that stands today in Biltmore Village.
A caption underneath it, 2 million pieces of literature propaganda went out from Asheville headquarters in 1938.
Asheville historian Vance Pollock has become a Pelley enthusiast.
Eccentric, dark eccentric. Better run the other way for 9 out of 10 people. But I just happened to be one of those in the minority of people that my curiosity was aroused.
Pelley's publishing showed a flair for the dramatic, but revealed his dark views.
How could those little boys of 6, the millions of them, know of the world's liars and shysters and villains and blackguards awaiting to beguile them, to whisper weird enticements, to fill them with illusions, and then tear them asunder?
Pollock says Pelley first became disenfranchised during World War I. He then tried to be a screenwriter in Hollywood. Unsuccessful, he blamed the Jews.
This is the sort of thing that he pumped out of this very building by the hundreds of thousands of copies. It's the cheap paper tracts that were, by and large, very anti-Semitic. And the more pages you turn, the deeper down the rabbit hole it goes.
Pelley didn't get much political traction in Asheville. He was largely outcast as a weirdo.
Everybody who knows the name William Dudley Pelley in Asheville, the 2 words most commonly associated with him, I would guess, are Nazi and ghosts.
Ghosts, yes. Pelley stayed bankrolled by a handful of wealthy benefactors, mainly widows, who were not interested in Pelley's politics, but more his spiritualism.
Reincarnation was a tenet of his philosophy or doctrine, which was really not generally accepted in America in those days.
He did seances and stuff all the time, you know what I mean? He was always talking to spirits and aliens. The exact same sorts of threads that run through some of the QAnon movement that have surfaced in recent years.
Sprinkled around his seances, Pollock says Pelley pressed on with his publications into the early 40s, his main target to agitate then President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who viewed Pelley with great ire. Pelley accused Roosevelt of being a warmonger and the American dictator after being elected for a 4th term, and that he was in bed with a communist.
And this is the article that the prosecution leaned on quite heavily in convicting Pelley of sedition in 1942. And he's still politically resistant to the idea of war.
Pelley served 7 years in prison for sedition.
Pelley found a receptive audience in parts of America where people felt dispossessed and felt left out in the American project. And there are certainly people today who feel like no one speaks for them, so the attraction of an authoritarian leader could be understandable to some.
Historians like Elliston and Pollock argue today's politics are not about left or right, blue versus red, Republican or Democrat, but more about democracy as a whole and preserving the American way of life.
I think there are a lot of the same sort of, well, we'll say charismatic characters who are maybe pitching ideas that aren't very American.
We can learn from this history. We can learn about bad examples from our past just as good ones, and Pelley will provide plenty of insight for those who want to learn about how a fringe fascist lived among us.
Instead of working to destroy or pervert rugged individualism, it cultivates and adulates it.
William Dudley Pelley,
Bizarre character.
a footnote in American political history.
He wanted to make himself the American Führer.
After William Dudley Pelley got out of prison for sedition, he lived in Indiana, where he continued his publishing, but at a much less inflammatory rate, and he stayed largely out of trouble. Well,